Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwara, Gurureva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam Trilokyam Sacharacharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Tvameva Mata Cha Pita Tvameva Tvameva Bandhuscha Sakha Tvameva Tvameva Vedyadravindam Tvameva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Jai Guru. Yata sarvani bhutani pratibhanti stithani cha yatraivo bhashamam yanti tasmai satyatmane namaha. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yep. Great. So for Elizabeth, those are two chants we do to start this class. The first is a salutation to the Guru, specifically my teacher. I always start with that out of respect for him. And the second is the invocation. That's the very first verse of this text. So we invoke all the good energy so that we have a good class tonight. So I think we have, did we finish the story of Shukra, of Bhargava? Ganesh, did we finish it?
Yeah, we're starting.
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
I think we start the story of Dhamma tonight, correct?
The washing of the impurities of the mind.
All right, what page, what verse?
Page 84, number 28.
All right, will you help us out, Ganesh?
Mano Malakshalam. The washing of the impurities of the mind. Janto Kritavicharasya Vigal Vritti Chetasah Vijnanavashato Nunam Svabhava Samprasidati. For a person who has done reflection or inquiry to whose movements of the mind are vanishing, his essential nature certainly brightens up by the power of knowledge or intelligence.
So, what our problem is that there are dimensions of our psyche that cover or occlude our essential nature. It's not that I need to get something or achieve something or attain something. We need to get rid of something. Elizabeth, I'm gonna see if I can draw on some things that you'll understand. I forget, does OA use the same 12 steps as AA?
Yes, they do.
Aha.
All step groups do.
I'm an old drunk. I celebrated 36 years clean and sober last month. So I'm familiar very much with the 12 steps. So we have a parallel in the 12 steps here. In the fourth step, Bill W. says, being convinced that self and its various manifestations is what had defeated us. Here we mean self with a small s. So what do? We do a fourth step, so what in the way. That makes sense? Then we do 6 and 7. That's our attempt to remove what blocks us from the sunlight of the spirit. So this verse is saying very much the same thing. And then it gives us these 3 techniques that are helpful. So will you list them for us again, Ganesh?
For a person who has done reflection or inquiry, whose movements of the mind are vanishing, his essential nature certainly brightens up by the power of knowledge.
So reflection, we think about it, manana. Inquiry, who am I? What is my essential nature? What is this universe and how has it come about? This kind of practice, when I can let go of the false narratives about myself, when I can let go of my superimposed stories of the world, then what's really here at the very deepest level becomes clear. Any thoughts on this before we go on? All right, next verse.
Vicharena parignata swabhavasyodidatmanah anukampya bhavantiha brahma vishnavindra shankaraha. For one who has well understood his essential nature by reflection or inquiry, and whose self-knowledge has risen, Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the sustainer, Indra, the lord of the demigods, and Shankara, the destroyer, become worthy of sympathy. Note, the stage of fulfillment of the sage who has realized his self excels even that of the gods.
Yes. So he's saying, and I misheard you on the last one. He said reflection or inquiry. And the word that he's using here is vichara. This verse he says vicharena, by means of inquiry. So what is this inquiry that he's talking about? So let's review how we do self-inquiry. The way we do it is we do take on the practice of what we call discrimination between the self and the not self. So I'm looking at the table. I'm not the table. I'm the one who sees the table, not self. When we go to the body itself, when I was a child, I had a little body. I went through adolescence, the body changed. I became an adult, the body's changed again. Some of us are on the downward 3rd act of life, the body's changed again. But I have been the knower of all the changes in the body. The body, like the table, is an object of cognition. I am not the body. I'm the knower of the body. We go to the realm of feelings. Sometimes I feel joy, sometimes I feel sorrow, sometimes anger, sometimes boredom. There's so many feelings. But I am the knower of my feelings. I'm not my feelings. We go to the realm of thought. The thoughts go by like your hand in front of your face, or like the sound of the traffic outside. But I am not my thoughts. I'm the knower of my thoughts. So who or what is it who knows the thoughts, even knows the space between the thoughts? And it's tricky because it's like trying to see your own eyes. It is like trying to taste your tongue. It is like trying to shine a flashlight on its own batteries. You will never see yourself as an object. But you're not unknown. You're you. Don't you know you're you? How do you know? Self is self-evident. It's self-shining. In a very quiet mind, if I inquire into the nature of that pure experience of I, we come to see that it's a changeless reality. So this is the kind of investigation that we're invited to undertake. Now, what about this world? How do we investigate into the world? We begin to look at the world and begin to see that it comes about like the dream state. You are the God of your dream. The infinite does not create the world the way a potter creates a pot, but it is imaged, it is imagined. There's all sorts of ramifications. In the end, we begin to see that it's all God. It's all okay. There's nothing to fear. There's a ground of being of the whole world. It's the same as the self. Self with a capital S here. So this is the inquiry that we're invited to undertake. Any questions, thoughts on this? Next verse.
Koham kathamidam cheti yavat nanta vicharitam samsaradambaram tavat andhakaropamam sthitam. Who am I? Whence is this universe? As long as such inquiry is not made within, so long this show of worldly existence, which is like darkness, remains.
Yes, so he is riffing on exactly what I was talking about. The three questions that this particular scripture deals with is, who am I? What is this world? And how has it come about? And here the scripture is saying, if we don't get down with those three questions at their most profound level, we're like a person in darkness, an illusion and delusion. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
Sarva Shakti Anantatman Sarva Bhavantarasthitah Advitiya Chidatyantaha. Advitiya Chidityantaha. Yah Pashyati Sapashyati. The all-powerful, eternal self, seated inside every heart, is the non-dual consciousness. Whoever perceives thus within, he really sees.
Yes. So I see the world from my viewpoint. You see the world from your viewpoint. I'm aware of my body. You are aware of your body. I'm aware of my thoughts and feelings. You are aware of your thoughts and feelings. But when you, as it were, look behind your eyes and notice the knower, there's just the vast, empty space of consciousness. And when I look behind my eyes, there's just the vast, empty space of consciousness. The self in me is not like the self in you. The self in me is the self. So here's an exercise. As you're going around in the world and we see all the people that we like and dislike, and we judge this person and we don't judge that person, see if we can set all that aside. Don't pay attention to the body. Don't pay attention to their speech. Don't pay attention to their feelings or thoughts. Look them in the eye. And the conscious being looking out of those eyes is the same conscious being that's looking out of yours. All that differs is the equipment. The bodies, the feelings, the thoughts. But they're fundamentally inert. They're not where life is. That's yourself. And then we inquire into this phenomenal world. A place to start is to understand that everything in it, without exception, is impermanent. Nothing lasts. Eventually, we will deeply see that it's actually all divine imagination. Scriptures will teach it. That's what we call paroksha jnanam, indirect knowledge. But in our own meditation, the more still the mind becomes, the thinner the world becomes. We begin to see the mind is the world and the world is the mind. There's nothing really substantial. Next verse.
Parignyayopabhukto hi bhogo bhavati tushtaye vijnayase vitachoro maitrim iti na choratam. Only that enjoyment gives satisfaction which is tasted with full knowledge. A thief attended upon, after knowing him as such, becomes friendly. he does not assume the state of a thief.
So there's a wonderful story. My teacher's teacher, Swami Tapovana, was a very ascetic monk. And he used to wander in the Himalayas with just his orange kurta, didn't even wear a dhoti, big, long, like calf-length kurta, and barefoot, didn't even wear sandals, and a begging bowl. And he was walking through the Himalayas, and a bunch of robbers came upon him. And they said, "Give us all your money." He says, "You're welcome to all that I have, but I don't have anything. By the way, do you have any food?" "Oh, he's a bhikshu. He's a monk." So they sat down and they shared their food with him. Once he got to know them, they weren't thieves anymore. They were so what we need to figure out is, what is this world? Right now, the people, places, things, and conditions of the world are like thieves. They rob us of our serenity. They rob us of our peace of mind. Why? Because I think the world has the capacity to make me happy or to make me miserable. And yoga thunders. The world isn't bad, also isn't good. The names and forms are essentially void. When I'm in the state of craving, when I'm in the state of longing, I'm suffering. When I do get what I want, when desire and object of desire become one, for a moment, the longing goes away. But then I develop an attachment and I want to repeat it again and again and again. And what yoga teaches us is, let it go. Let the mind stay home, abiding in the self, abiding in God. So those same objects that were thieves robbing me of my peace, they're just friends, because I see them for what they are. Just the Lord appearing as name and form. No inherent power to make me happy or make me miserable. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
Manaso nigrihitasya lila bhogolpakopiyah tameva labdhavistaram klishtatvat bahumanyate. Even though the enjoyment of pleasures of the restrained mind is little or insignificant, that enjoyment, which has not obtained extension, is thought of as abundant because of the suffering needed to secure it.
Read it one more time for me.
Even though the enjoyment of pleasures of the restrained mind is little or insignificant, that enjoyment which has not obtained extension is thought of as abundant because of the suffering needed to secure it.
Yes. So the idea is, if you are a person who thinks that peace comes from getting rid of all the objects, in AA, we would call this white knuckling it out of willpower. I'm gonna not indulge. There's no happiness there. And then if you get a little respite from that, little relief. I was talking with a student a couple weeks ago, and they had gone off to do MDMA, Molly. And they were saying, well, I just wanted release, Jim. From what? The problem centers in my mind. The problem is my yearning, my longing, my attachment. Yoga invites us to deal with that fundamental discontent. Now, thank God, God is the most beloved. The self is the most beloved, or we'd all be in deep trouble. This is why a meditative practice becomes so important. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna will say, the person who gets rid of the objects of desire but allows the desire to remain behind is verily a hypocrite. But their desire leaves them upon seeing the Supreme. What do you mean by that?
Can you say that slogan again really quickly?
Certainly.
Sorry about that.
The person who gets rid of all the objects of desire, actually in the scripture they use masculine pronouns, but I'm not going to do that. The person who gets rid of all their objects of desire, but allows the desire to remain behind, is verily a hypocrite. We just talked about that. That's like the person who's white knuckling it in program. But their desire leaves them upon seeing the Supreme, or to frame it in the 12-step language, a spiritual experience is what frees us from the desire to use. That's what we want to do. We want to remove the compulsion, remove the desire. Now, in the second chapter of Gita, Krishna will say it this way. When a person casts off all the cravings, all the longings, all the desires of the mind, that's the first part, and is satisfied in the self, by the self, then they're said to be a person of steady wisdom. Does that make it clearer, Justin?
Sorry, I got to unmute myself. Yes, thank you. My apologies. I liked how you said that. I wanted to hear it again in the word, in the exact wording. So thank you.
It's Lord Krishna. So this is what we're invited to do, is to see the world for what it is. The way Shankara, this is an 8th century saint, Elizabeth, framed it this way. he talks about the practice of what he calls Shama Tranquility, that peaceful state of mind when it rests in steady contemplation of the goal, meaning God consciousness. After having muhur muhu, again and again, detached itself from the chaos of the sense objects. How? Through a steady observation of their defects. I'm kind of riffing on program language tonight. So you're out with some friends and they say, this is 30-year-old Chateau Lafite red wine. It's $1,000 a bottle. You can have 1/2 glass, can't you? So what do we who are alcoholics have to do? Think the drink through. When did I ever have a half a glass of wine? This may be $1,000 a bottle, but it's not far away from wine in the box. And then the gutter. You think it through. The steady observation of their defects. Or we can do this with more subtle things. Well, I just want to point out to people where they're wrong. How's that working out for you? Well, it angers everybody. You might try not doing that. See what happens. And again, I love what Shankara says. Muhur muhu. Again and again. Meaning we don't detach from the sense objects all at once. We go through it over and over. Our minds are pretty stupid. Real detachment from the sense objects comes through deep and profound insight. Deep and profound insight. And let's review what I call the ruthless rule of the mind. The mind will return to the experience that gets given us the greatest joy. Luckily, if you continue your spiritual practice, you continue prayer and meditation, if you let go of the world just even a little bit, you will have moments of deep peace, where the struggle is gone. And even if you can do it at will right away, every day, you'll remember it. Your mind will want to get back there. Then the same quality of the mind that used to drive us into an addictive relationship with the world starts to drive us towards the infinite. In the end, desire is the engine for spiritual growth, but we just turn it inward. It's called mumukshutva, the burning desire for liberation. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
बन्धमुक्तो महीपालो ग्राममात्रेण तुष्यति परै अपधो नाक्रान्तो न राज्यं बहुमन्यते. A king freed from bondage is pleased with a mere village. The one who has not been bound by enemies nor overpowered by them does not think of even a kingdom as abundant.
So if you are a king and you are defeated by the next door king, and they throw you in jail for 10 years, then they say, okay, your sentence is over, but you no longer get to be king, you're just mayor of this little village. Thank you. But to the person who has the bondage of the mind, nothing will satisfy them. And if you have that inner freedom, you're the wealthiest of people. Master Jesus phrased it this way: my kingdom is not of this world. I have treasure you know not of. Seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, and all the rest will be added unto you. Same idea. Gain this inner freedom, and the world takes care of itself. Any thoughts? Next verse.
Manaso vijayat nanya gatirasti bhavarnave tavat nishithave tala valganti hridivasanaha ekatattva dridha dridabhyasat yavatna vijitam manaha. In the ocean of worldly existence, there is no refuge other than the conquest of the mind. As long as the mind is not conquered by the firm practice of the one truth or reality, so long do the night ghosts of imagination dance in the heart.
Yes. So, what is it that we need to renounce? What is it that we need to conquer? The only renunciation that is efficacious, and the only one that's necessary, is to renounce the mind itself. So we need to stop believing the mind. Thoughts and feelings arise. Many of us think, I must act on them. If the desire for a chocolate cake comes to mind, I have to eat it. If the need to insult somebody arises in my mind, I have to say it. If I'm angry at someone, I have to tell them off. So what yoga says is, just because you're thinking and feeling it doesn't mean you have to act on it. we learn to step back, to pause. Understanding this is just fancy. This is just imagination. Everything I need to be at peace is right here. So we learn to not believe our own thoughts. We learn that just because we have an impulse, it does not mean we have to act. This dials down the energy of the mind. By doing this, the mind starts to slow down. And we can begin to apprehend the substratum that's behind the mind, the ultimate context, my essential nature. Is Fang online tonight?
Yes, Jim.
Yes. So share with us some of the stuff along the line of this that you may have learned in your meditation retreat.
Well, I just came out of a 10-day Vipassana silent retreat in North Fork, and the way that this meditation method works is you concentrate your mind, and on the fourth day, they just tell you not to move your body at all. So you're sitting for an hour, hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours without moving your legs at all. And what one notices over time when one does all the practices, it's about 10 hours or so, a little bit over 10 hours of meditation per day, is in the beginning, you think it's like impossible and it's just so painful all over the place. But then after a while, you start noticing that it's just the mind lying to you. Eventually, all the pain just dissolves into physical sense, like just vibrations. That's all it is, just vibrational sensations. But you have to sit long enough and not trust the mind. And eventually you notice that your body is actually just fine. Like, yes, your knee is a little bit sore when you get up, but there's no chronic pain. There's nothing that's actually terrible that's going to happen. It's just when you're in the moment, it feels like the pain is going to go on forever and ever, but that's just not true. I mean, obviously, like, you don't want to hurt yourself. You have to sort of slowly ease your way into it. But you really notice that you can actually tolerate, you can you're much more powerful than you think
But
you
I'm more interested in what you may have learned about thoughts and feelings.
Well, your thoughts are lies in many ways. It's kind of like what you mentioned earlier, Jen, that just because you have these thoughts and feelings doesn't mean you have to act on them. And that's exactly it, because your mind is
And what
telling you,
happens to them?
they disappear after a while.
Yes.
You become equanimous, you become the quality of vision, because you realize that you start losing the aversion to quote unquote the pain, because the pain itself disappears. You don't see it as pain anymore. You just see it as sensations, just vibratory sensations. So the pleasure and the pain all become neutralized after a while.
Yes.
By not doing anything. It's what you say, Jim, like, don't just do anything, just sit there. And that's exactly what we did.
Yes. Now, did any of your personal issues with work or relationship or family come up in the retreat?
I was actually pretty okay. I actually found one major thing did happen. Yes, a lot of love and compassion, especially in the last 2 days, arose because we did metta meditation, which is compassion meditation for the last 2 days.
But I'm more than thinking of if, say, someone has a resentment or a trauma or a fear, what happens to it in a 10-day meditation?
They all bubble up to the surface, but I've basically been processing that for a while now. So, but around me, everybody was crying a lot of the time. But I had done a lot of that processing already. So for me, it was pretty okay. But a lot of people afterwards, when we could talk to each other again on the last day, they talked a lot about how these things were bubbling up as sensations in the body that had apparently been trapped or repressed or suppressed somehow. And as these energy sensations started moving their body, these memories or thoughts would surface and they will let it go and it will pass over them and they would get a lot of relief from that.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. So this is absolutely classic, good Vipassana practice, but also Vedanta practice. That's what this verse is talking about. What one sees is the fundamental unreality of the mind, and that the mind is the world. That's the point. You get it intellectually by hearing it, by reading it in the book, but you get it experientially through meditation, and then meditation in action. Now, I'm thinking of another fellow who went on a long 10-day retreat. And he was absolutely convinced that the cook hated him. Mind you, this is a silent retreat. Nobody's talking. But somehow this is what his mind told him. The cook hates me. The cook hates me. And for him, it became so real until he was able to see it's just imagination. That's this world. Any other thoughts on this incredibly important part of the teaching? Now, we do not have a structure here at Silent Way to do long retreats, but I highly recommend them. And many of our students have done these Goenka Vipassana retreats. I just highly recommend. Highly, highly recommend. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. Just because I've done Vipassana also, and I guess I'm curious what your opinion or reaction is to the style of like the instruction on meditation that they give in Vipassana about like the body scanning and all that stuff.
So was yours one of the Goenka ones?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they do a body scan.
Right. So when you personally, in your meditation practice, when you're meditating, like, are you body scanning or?
No.
Okay. So what is your, hesitate to say opinion, but like, because sometimes I think
it
back
almost
to that.
doesn't matter.
You know, okay.
It almost doesn't matter. The body scan, or like if you go to Spirit Rock, they're going to tell you to be with your breath.
Mm-hmm.
They just become a place to park the mind. Now, one of the things that Goenka does say, now again, I have not done one of the Goenka retreats personally. I've only know this from the outside.
Mm-hmm.
But they put forward the notion that they call them sankharas,
Mm-hmm.
which is Pali for sanskara.
Mm-hmm.
So it means an impression.
Mm-hmm.
They lodge themselves as pain, sensation, irritation in the body. I don't think it matters. It'll all come up. In our tradition, we have a term called kashaya. And you'll find this, specifically talked about in the gloss on the Mandukya Upanishad. But if you meditate and just don't do something, sit there, the unconscious will start to unload. And whatever's in there, Now, it may come up in the form of body sensation. It may come up as weeping and wailing. It may come up as absolutely uncontrollable lust. It may come up as horrible anger. It may come up with existential fear. You fear like you're going to die. And then it passes. And what happens, these hridaya granti, these knots of the heart, not a wonderful term. They emerge out of the unconscious, this unloading of the unconscious. And they come into view, and you do nothing except be woke AF. Watch them. Have enormous compassion. And then they pass. So what you actually put your attention on, it doesn't matter what. It can be a mantra, it can be scanning your body, it can be the breath. Did that make sense?
Yeah.
So I don't say no, that's a bad technique, but I also don't say, oh, that's absolutely the only technique. This is the rule of thumb for meditative techniques. The grosser your mind, the more meditative supports you want. So, for example, Elizabeth was visiting the Hare Krishna temple. They have a very active form of meditation. They sing and dance and play instruments and sing Hare Krishna. That is a meditation. But it's a very active meditation for very gross minds, frankly. As your mind becomes more quiet, you drop various meditative supports away. So even subtler than scanning your body is Atma Vichara. Koham, who am I? Letting the attentive faculty of the mind be merged into the self. Absolute silence. And it's what body where. But one of the benefits of the body scan meditation is you begin to have the experience that you are not the body. You begin to see the body as it is, an object of cognition. Did you have that experience, Fang?
I had that a bit, but I think the other thing that was very helpful was the silence part of it, which allowed you to see that you're not the little narration voice in your head. So you could be separate from that. That was very helpful too.
Yes. You are, none of the voices are you. You cannot think a real thought. No personal thought of self or any, which it only comes about by narrated voices. None of them are real. None of them are real. Thank you for sharing that, both of you. All right, next verse. How are you doing with this, Elizabeth? She's still with us?
Yeah, I'm here. Some of it
It's a-
reminds me a little bit of the ending of the poem that's in Nights in White Satin. Cold-hearted orb that rules the night, removes the color from our sight. Red is gray and yellow white, but we decide which is right and which is an illusion.
But all of them are illusions. There are not some ideas that are real or some perceptions that are real. What yoga is saying, if you can see it, it isn't real. The only thing that's real is the seer.
Yeah.
It's even deeper than Nights in White Satin. You're too young to know that album.
I am, but the 60s came around in popularity in the 80s, and I'm 55.
I see. Oh,
Yeah,
that's generation.
But,
Go on.
so-
Okay, next verse. Next verse.
Bhrityo bhimatakaritvat mantri satkaryakaranat samantaschendriyakrantya guru vidya pradhanatah lalanat snigdhalalana palanat pavanah pita suhrit uktam cha vishvasat mano manye manishinam. A servant by doing what is desired, a minister by causing the performance of good deeds, a general by the power of attacking, a teacher by the giving of knowledge, a loving woman by her fondling, and the sacred or pure father by protecting are called friendly. I consider that by faith, the mind is spoken of as a friend of the wise.
So again, he is riffing on another verse from Gita where Krishna will say the mind is the enemy of the ignorant, but that same mind becomes the friend of the wise. So again, using 12-step as a metaphor. In the beginning, we're taught about our stinking thinking, our committee. If I'm by myself in my head, I'm in a bad neighborhood. All these very earthy slogans. But then after we've done our step work, and that means we've also done step 11, prayer and meditation. Bill W. says, sanity will have returned. And at the beginning of the discussion of the 11th step, he'll talk about the development of the intuition, which becomes a working part of the mind, where we can ask for direction, get intuitive leadings of what to say, where to go, what to do. That only becomes operative when we let go all of our cravings. I gotta have it this way, and our aversions. I'll never put up with that. When we reach this point of equanimity, then this deeper part of the mind, where the mind of each individual is connected to the infinite. You're not dealing just with your desktop on top of your desk. You're connected to the cloud. The wealth of wisdom that can come directly. So that same mind, when it was filled with ignorance, full of attachment and aversion, oh, that's an enemy. It afflicts me. It's a torturer. That same mind, when it's become purified. And let's not forget grace. Grace has a big part of it. One person can be practicing a long time and they still have a lot of trouble. Another person, they seem to get this rather quickly. Who's to say why? That's mystery. That's race. But all of us can get value. Again, back to Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, even a little of this knowledge frees us from great fear. All right, next verse.
Evam manomanim Rama bahu pankakalinkatam viveka varina siddhyai prakshalya lokavan bhava. Rama, let you become possessed of lustre after washing thus the jewel of the mind, stained with much of mud by the water of discrimination for obtaining perfection.
So the image is here. Let's say you have a beautiful gem, a sapphire, and it's all covered with dirt. So you wash it so you can see the beautiful luster of the gem. So also, right now, my problem is I have a dirty mind. I need to be brainwashed. How? With knowledge, we scrub the barnacles off the mind. And then when the mind has been purified, this doesn't mean good thoughts as opposed to bad thoughts, virtuous thoughts as opposed to vicious thoughts. It means fewer thoughts. And there's space around the mind. Then it becomes like a clear crystal. And the light of the divine just pours through. It's marvelous. Beautiful, beautiful image. Next verse. How many more in this section, Ganesh?
This is the last one.
Okay.
Indriyarin alam tirtva buddhya satyam avekshya cha tatraiva nisthito bhutva tirno bhava bhavarnavat evam te kathitam Rama mano nairmalya sadhanam. Thoroughly overcoming the enemies in the form of the senses, perceiving the truth by the intellect and becoming established there itself, be one who has crossed over the ocean of worldly existence. Rama, thus has been narrated to you the means for the purity of the mind.
Yes. So, having overcome, hereby says the senses, he means our attachments, our compulsions, our addictive relationship with the world. And with a mind made very pure, with the attention introverted, seeing if you can notice the knower. You see the fundamental unreality of any personal sense of self. That gives us this existential freedom from fear. Then I find out where happiness is. It's not out there. It's the mind freed from attachment, freed from its control issues, freed from longing. The mind comes home. And I found what the Christian scriptures call the pearl of great price, the great treasure. All right, well, we finished that section.
There's the final concluding mantra of the chapter, Jen. Should I
Oh,
just read
that is, there's one more.
There is a small one which basically says it's the end of the chapter.
Okay, go ahead and chant that.
Iti Sri Vasishta Sangrahe Bhargavopakhyanam Nama Ashtama Sargaha. Thus ends the 8th chapter titled The Story of Bhargava in the abridgment of Yoga Vasishta.
All right, so we have about another 4 or 5 minutes. I think we'll stop here with the text because I think, don't we start the story of Dhamma next?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's one of my absolute favorites. One of my absolute favorites. So we have time for a few questions before we wrap up.
I have a question.
Please go ahead, Alan.
Might take me a bit to figure out how to phrase this. So during this class, we've been talking a lot about, well, I guess. So sometimes the way we talk about thoughts, I know this is an oversimplification, but like that there's cravings and aversions, like thoughts tend to be in those two buckets. But I've just been thinking about other types of thoughts that don't necessarily fit so neatly into those buckets. So like one could be like a compassionate thought, like not like a lustful or like love.
Yeah,
thought,
not
like
all thoughts are
compassion.
negative. Yeah.
Well, but and then like another one would be like curiosity, like not necessarily like a burning desire to know something, but just like curiosity about the world. So I guess like those types of thoughts that aren't like a craving.
Or you can say, oh, that's a truck going down the street.
Yeah,
Very
exactly.
neutral thought. Yeah.
So yeah, I guess so. Like, where do those thoughts fit into this framework?
The point that this particular chapter is getting at is all thoughts without exception are fundamentally imagination. Doesn't say not to think them. It says just don't take them seriously.
Okay. But a thought like, I need to have a chocolate cake right now or something like that, there would be like a more strong suggestion not to think something like that than that's a truck.
Well, what about your love for your wife is real? How about that one? And what this chapter is saying is that's just a dressed up form of the same thing.
Sure, but you could, I guess with that one, it's a little bit easier to say that's like I mean, in a very basic way, that's like a thought that's a craving.
So
But
let
like
me see
what
if I
about
can
an
give you
objective
an
thought?
example. If you have a dream, you ever had a flying dream?
Yes.
Okay. So in your dream, the ability to fly is real
Mm-hmm.
to the dreamer.
Mm-hmm.
Feels very real. And if you look at trees or houses or cars in the dream, when you wake up, are any of those things real?
No.
Doesn't mean you didn't experience them.
Mm-hmm.
You see?
Yeah.
Or if you go to a movie. Now I have to change movies because it's so old now, but one of my favorite movies in the whole world was Beaches with Bette Midler. Any of you out there see that movie?
Not me.
Okay, well, in it, Bette Midler has this best friend, and her best friend is frankly just very codependent, and Bette Midler is very narcissistic. But in the end, Bette Midler's friend dies of cancer. And Bette Midler sings, "You are the wind beneath my wings." Everybody comes out of the theater into the lobby. Everybody is just booing and sobbing. Oh, it was such a good movie. It was so sad. Now look at what happened. You have ecstasy and sorrow at the same time. Do you see that?
Mhm.
Why? Because you know it's just a movie.
Mhm.
So the yogi looks at the world the same way. Doesn't mean we don't participate in life. In fact, when you lose your fear, you can dive into life in a way the ordinary person can't. They're always holding back because they're scared.
So what about a thought like, I wonder why, I don't know, I wonder why flowers exist? Like a curiosity thought.
There's nothing wrong with it. Go ask Google. Okay, it's time to quit. We can stay late and talk more if you wish. All right, thank you all. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Sri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om. Om.
Okay, I'll see y'all this week when another class comes.
Okay, check out the website and you'll get a description of the various things that we're doing.
Okay, thank you.
And do you want my phone number if you want to just call and talk?
Yeah, hold on. Let me get my cell phone.
Okay.
Hey, Jim, if you wanted to talk to her after class, we don't know.
That's fine. Elizabeth, do you want to talk now? Why don't we wait? Do you want to talk now? Or you want to call me some other time?
I'll call you some other time. I was gonna put
It's
it up.
getting
in
late
chat.
where you are. Yeah.
I'll put my phone number up in chat.
Okay. I can't see the chat, so I'm going to give you
Oh,
mine
okay.
and you can text me. I have macular degeneration. I'm legally blind. That's why I have Ganesh do the chanting and the reading.
Oh, okay. Hold on just a second.
I love your accent.
Thank you.
Are you from
But
Texas
you can't-
originally?
You can't text, right? You just have to call.
I can do text, but so you can text me, but let me give you my phone number and then I'm going to log off.
Okay.
510-220-8453.
510-820.
No, 510-220-8453.
8453. And
Got
your
it?
name is Jim.
Jim Gilman, like, yeah, Gilman. But I don't want to have a deep conversation with you on text. I'd rather talk with you.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.